My watch is dead on. Call the meeting to order and welcome everyone here. Ask for approval of the agenda.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion made, second. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, Joe, old business, general budget process.
All right, thank you, Mayor and members of the board. Tonight is work session number 3, although technically it's your second work session since we had to combine 2 last time. The outline for tonight's presentation will just check in with where we are along the budget schedule and process. We'll give you your budget references for the topics that we'll discuss tonight, and then we'll get into the highlights of the budget topics that we're going to discuss with you tonight. And then, as with every budget work session, we'll have time for public input. And then as far as the budget schedule, you've already completed 2 legs of that with the budget message and 2 of the work sessions. Your work session tonight will review the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, sidewalks, street paving, and intersection improvements. Much like we did with your nonprofit policy, we think we need to give you a heads up on some things to consider in the future for a possible revision to your fund balance policy, and then open it up to any public input. And then next Monday, June 3rd, is your public hearing. As far as budget ordinance adoption, it can occur that night after the public hearing. You also have time dedicated at a work session that's scheduled for June 12th, if you would like to use that time, just as long as it's any time before July 1st. As far as your references for the topics tonight, your Parks and Rec master plan, if you look at page F68, that's got some good background information on it. When we get into sidewalks, if you reference F21, that's got some background information on that. When we get into street paving and intersections, the street paving has some information on F10. The intersections is actually a good reference is a snapshot of the screen that's right in front of you. That's from the recommended capital budget pages. That's on E1. And then we'll talk to you about some specific intersections, the ones that we've actually recommended you all fund in this coming fiscal year. The first one being the intersection of North Arundel and Green Pace. There's some good background information on page F3. The intersection of Proctor and Pierce, that's on page F7. The intersection of Shepherd School and Old Bun, that's on F8. And with that, we will start with the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. And I recognize Sheila Long of the Parks and Rec Department, and she has a guest with her tonight that I'll let her introduce.
I'm Jen Beat, along with Recreation Resources Service, a recreation technical assistance agency located out of NC State University. We're a partnership with North Carolina State Parks, and we assist with administering the Parks and Recreation Trust Fund grant. Thank you all for having me.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the board. Thank you for allowing us to speak on behalf of the Parks and Recreation Master Plan and an impact fee study. So we're just going to do a quick overview of what we're going to look at tonight. And the one thing that we've talked about a lot over the past year and through our budget work sessions is our strategic plan. And so we are going to talk about how a Parks and Recreation Master Plan ties into our strategic plan. We're also going to talk about how we're growing as a community and that impact on our department and the services that we offer, and how we're going to move forward. If we take a look at our strategic plan, celebrating a vibrant downtown and creating an atmosphere for a vibrant downtown, Parks and Recreation has a vital role in that, so we will assist with revitalization of downtown Zebulon by development of events, entertainment, and cultural attractions that will draw people to the downtown area. as well as small town life. We are directly going to be tied to promoting more community events and festivals, enhancing and creating more community gathering places, and increasing the connectedness and walkability in the community. Also growing smart, we're planning for appropriate land use to meet transportation and housing needs, as well as maintaining appropriate staffing to support expected service levels. Since 2010, we've had a 12% growth in population, and our current and future growth is really, it will stand out the most for us and have a significant impact in all capacities of the services the town offers, but also our parks and rec. If you look at January of 2018, according to Wake County, we had 2,065 existing dwelling units. And we've got over a year's worth, nearly a year and a half of any dwellings that would have been built and occupied since. But not counting those, in addition to the over 2,000, we have an additional 2,000 approved dwelling units as of last week. That number will continue to grow, and we anticipate our population to, based on that information, to double in the next 5 to 10 years. We also continue to have an increase during business hours as we have industry and retail opportunities. So as a growing department, we continue to maintain Community Park, Little River Park, Gill Street Park, and Whitley Park. We also have joint use parks and property to include Wakeland Elementary, Zebulon Elementary School. And we are also working with GlaxoSmithKline on the property that adjoins the municipal complex. We also have our community center, and we have the Greenway Master Plan. Public Works has led the charge on this project for our community, and we are very appreciative of that. The Walkability Committee is housed within the Parks and Rec Department. We help support that project, and so we will continue to work in that capacity to further walkability within our community. We also have the Farm Fresh Market, which has continued to grow we're in our 5th year, and we'll be looking at how that will continue to be successful within our community. So the impact of this growth on our department, we have an expanding population, and with an expanding population, there are adjusted services, and we'll need to adjust resources accordingly. We'll need to adapt to the changing desires, needs, and expectations, so we need to understand what those are, which would include adapting to diverse programs and events, and strengthening our focus on culture and events, which directly ties to the small town life and vibrant downtown. There's also an increased demand on our staff. So we need to conduct park assessments, and we need to evaluate our staff level and needs. We need to analyze our reliance on public works and redirect resources, improve efficiency and effectiveness to satisfy unmet needs. This impact of growth is also directly tied to our budget, and we need to be wise to that. There are limited funding resources available. So we're going to be looking for opportunities to maximize through external funding, as well as building and expanding upon partnerships. Specifically, the property with GlaxoSmithKline in the chamber, our local social and cultural organizations, and our local public schools and charter schools. And we will talk about how we're going to engage them a little bit further on in the presentation tonight. So what's next? What are our next steps in accommodating this changing community that we have? And we're going to need to conduct a Parks and Recreation Master Plan, which will help us answer a lot of the questions that we have based on our growth, and it will help us prioritize and identify our needs and create a plan for moving forward. So our recommendation is in the upcoming CIP that $95,000 be included for the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, which will include an impact fee study, which we'll speak on a little bit more later on in the presentation. And we will also be sure to engage our community and engage our partners as we develop this plan. We also need to be wise in our future budget planning, which will include operating our CIP and external funding sources. So in review, a comprehensive master plan will catalog greater community resources and services. So it will not look at just what the Parks and Rec Department of the town of Zebulon does. It will also look at programs offered by churches, schools. It will look at the Boys and Girls Club. So it will look at large what is happening in the Zebulon region to see what resources are available outside of the town that are supplemented externally, as well as maybe where we're lacking resources. So it will provide long-term direction. It will anticipate for the growth that we spoke of. It will identify strengths, challenges, and opportunities, prioritize needs and community desire, provide a plan that will include goals, strategies, and actions. It will be created with our community and with stakeholders. It guides our decision-making process, and it supports funding requests and grant opportunities, which Jen is going to speak further about how that is directly tied later in this presentation. And it provides a framework for ordinances, codes, and plans, and that will also be directly tied to the impact fee study that we'll speak about. The comprehensive plan will be a similar process to what you experienced with the Greenway Master Plan or the Greenway Bicycle and Pedestrian Master Plan. It will be very strong in community involvement, and we will be collecting data. We'll analyze and we'll assess the data that we receive. We'll identify goals, prepare the plan. It will be presented. It will be revised. We will put it before you to be adopted, and then we'll implement that plan. And part of implementing that plan, we'll be looking at individual parks and having more detailed plans created for the parks as we move forward. And we'll continue to analyze and revise as necessary. So as we engage our community, you'll see surveys. We'll do public meetings. There'll be pop-up park and event opportunities. We'll also do focus groups with our community members, staff, elected officials, the advisory board, and our partners. And partners that we anticipate to engage will be our Zebulon Youth Council and our advisory board, churches and civic groups, neighbors and developers. We'll also look at the 5-county stadium, as that's in our strategic plan, and how we can better utilize that resource here in our community. And we'll continue to work with the Chamber of Commerce, the Downtown Arts Council. We're going to engage Greater Raleigh Convention and Visitors Bureau further. We're going to talk to Wake County and neighboring communities in our industries, and we'll also talk more with our schools and local youth organizations. And to speak a little bit further about our schools, we currently have wonderful partnerships with our schools, but it's time for us to reevaluate some of those contracts that we have with our joint park agreements, and this will be a great opportunity to do that and to consider future opportunities as our department is growing and our need is growing. Is there additional opportunity to further joint partnerships? In our future budget planning, we're going to be able to prioritize programs and projects, and that will include both our operating budget and our CIP. So in our operating budget, we'll be able to look more closely at the types of programs that we offer, our target participants, and our staffing. In our CIP planning, we're going to look at renovation, expansion, and new projects. Also, for our future budget planning, we currently have the recreation and open space fee in lieu. It's an ordinance that's been adopted where when development opportunities arise and they choose, rather than developing open space within their project, they can opt to pay a fee to the town. Those fees have resulted in supporting the Greenway project at Beaver Dam in recent years. And so that's just an example of how that works. And what we are going to be looking at doing is offering an impact fee so that regardless of the requirements for open space within a development, there's also going to be a recreation impact fee. Because even though developers are adding open space within their plans, it still has a direct impact on the new residents. They still have a direct impact on our park system, and we still have to be able to plan for those. And so this is an opportunity that we have to create revenues that will go directly towards recreation projects so that we can implement the things that are in our master plan. And the impact fee study, so there is a state statute that does give us the authority to charge a recreation impact fee. In our local act and charter, we also have 3 things that we're going to be looking for, and that's a description of the anticipated capital cost of the town of additional or expanded services expanded service facilities generated by new construction. We also have to have a description of relevant characteristics of construction that give rise to additional or expanded facilities and a plan for providing future facilities. If we can provide something that meets those 3 criteria that are in our local act or charter, then we can charge an impact fee. And so what we would do is utilize our master plan to create a formula that will support our park system development and growth. It also gives us the opportunity to seek additional funds. I've listed just potential grant opportunities that we could seek that we would be able to utilize the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. We'd be able to leverage funds that we raise through the revenues from impact fees. And Kaboom, Blue Cross and Blue Shield, there's the National Endowment for the Arts, Recreation Trails Program, and then 2 that we're probably most familiar with are going to be the Parks and Recreation Trust Fund and the Land, Water, and Conservation Fund. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Jen Beadle with Recreation Resources Service, who can provide us a little bit more insight into how a Parks and Recreation Master Plan impacts your competitiveness in a grant process.
Okay, thanks, Sheila. That's interesting and awesome things that y'all have going on. I don't need this. I'm loud. Oh, you do? Okay. Okay. Yeah, so as y'all can see, the town has a lot going on with Parks and Recreation, and that's really, really a great thing. Like I said, I represent the Parks and Recreation Trust Fund, which is a dollar-for-dollar matching grant that is provided by the state of North Carolina, comes out of our general fund. And for all the reasons, if you guys maybe want to flip back to where Sheila lists the benefits of having a master plan, of course, you know, I'm here to let you all know that having a Parks and Recreation master plan does make a local government a whole lot more competitive, increases their chances of receiving funding, not only just from the state, but also, you know, this list isn't comprehensive. There's a ton more grants out there. But these are the primary ones that local governments kind of turn to for money to leverage their own town funds, which is, of course, what we all want to do, in order to fund all the park projects like Sheila was talking about. And Sheila mentioned that you all did invest a lot of money and commitment to your Greenway plan. And it's my hope that you will put the same amount of energy and commitment and excitement behind a Parks and Recreation master plan, not only just for grants, and I can kind of explain why a comprehensive master plan for Parks and Recreation makes you competitive for a grant. You know, it's like, well, why is that necessary? Like, why does that increase my level of competitiveness? Well, for all the reasons that you all see here on the slide that details the comprehensive master plan. Grants opportunities can pop up. As you all know, money's funny, and sometimes money can just come out of nowhere, more or less, maybe, whatever. But it does, it happens, and we see it all the time. Not to name anything specific, because I don't know that anything has ever etched in stone. Is this that? Did the battery kick out of this? Yeah, low battery. Yeah, other local governments and the state and the federal government all offer grant opportunities from time to time, and some of them aren't ongoing, like the trust fund, that there's a general statute saying the legislature is going to provide this money every year. There are opportunities that just kind of pop up, like I said. And being project ready, really, you're not project ready unless you have a master plan. You're not ready to execute something immediately when, let's just say hypothetically, Wake County decides that it's in its budget is going to offer $20 million to local governments. And the majority of the time, even if it's like a year out, because a year, when we look at it, especially now in our grant cycle, we realize that a year really isn't a whole lot of time to get something prepared to apply for a grant for. And a lot of times the funders really want a local government to be ready, say, hey, Wake County, we have money set aside in our town budget that aligns with the master plan that says we are ready to add another gym to the community center, just hypothetically. And without a plan, your chances are very, very much reduced. And overall, that's what I stress. We were at a meeting not too long ago where there was talk of opportunity for some funding, and the people that are deciding or potentially deciding who will get that money, one of the requirements is that you're project ready within 6 months. And without a plan, without money budgeted in a CIP, you're pretty much out of the loop for that. So really, that's kind of painting the big picture. I can't stress enough how important it is to have a good quality master plan. Sheila's asking for $95,000 in the budget, and I think that's a very fair and reasonable amount. It's not over the top. Prices on everything have gone through the roof lately because work is so plentiful, which is good. But I think, what Sheila is stressing, I'm just here to back her up and to provide more, some outsider's perspective. Outsiders, I don't want to call myself an expert, but I'm just going to say that for fun. My training's perspective, and bring that to the table to support Sheila and support the town. I've been working with the town for a while. I worked with Greg. I really like it here. I was thinking about moving here, and I think it's just awesome how the town's grown. The subdivisions, the neighborhoods are all so pretty. Before Sheila got here, I rode around with Greg and Chris on the Gator and traveled down the whole corridor of the proposed first segment of the Greenway, which y'all just got funding, Campo and Parks and Recreation Trust Fund. And y'all were ready for that because you had the plan. But to my point, y'all live in a wonderful community, and I just want to see you be prepared and have opportunities to offset, and augment your budget. And that's it, really. Do any of you guys have questions for me?
You're with NC State.
Yep.
Does NC State offer any help on a master plan through the master's program?
NC State does not.
Does anyone else that you're aware of?
I can provide you with a list of firms and consultants. We have kind of like a roster. We don't really favor anybody, but we do have a list of resources that we're happy to provide.
I just know on various occasions we have had graduate students come in and work with us on various projects over the year, mainly in the planning phases of it, and saves us money. Yeah. So I didn't know if anybody had that available to them that you were aware of.
We do not at NC State. And I can tell you that even if you do reach out to, I know there's UNC Wilmington does a pretty good job. East Carolina used to have their undergraduate students have a whole semester of doing a master plan for communities. That faculty member retired like 5 years ago, so they've kind of phased that out. But I can tell you that because the universities charge such a hefty percentage that goes into their research budget, it gets complicated. But that's why NC State quit doing them, because of that whole dynamic with the university. And you end up really, from what I've seen, paid about the same amount as you would, using professionals.
Okay. All right, thank you.
And I want to take the opportunity to kind of bring home the message that Jen just shared in our recent Parks and Recreation Trust Fund process, in that we had a Greenway master plan, but we did not have a Parks and Recreation master plan. And the way grants like the Parks and Recreation Trust Fund, it's a scoring mechanism. And so you get points for certain things that you have, certain requirements that you've met. And just because we had the Greenway Master Plan, it did not accommodate or take place of the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. So we got some points, but not all. Right. And so it decreased our competitiveness in the process. And had we had the full points for the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, we more than likely would have been funded the first year, or fully funded at first. And so we were not originally funded by the Parks and Recreation Trust Fund process. We did not, we scored fairly well, but we were not ultimately funded. And having a higher score would have helped with that. And so we ended up with 90,000, although we had requested 500,000. And so that was kind of that direct impact. And we were able to access that 90,000 after, I believe, other projects fell through that had been funded. Mm-hmm. So we'll move along for you. All right. So our recommendation is to engage our community and conduct the comprehensive master plan, which is a cost of $95,000. And together we're going to grow our parks, programs, and community. I'm happy to answer any questions.
I have a couple. The open space fee in lieu, the multifamily, is that per living unit or per building?
Per dwelling unit.
Okay,
So that they're living in.
So if you have a duplex, it's going to be 5,000.
Right.
Okay. Okay. And I just wrote down, is that high enough?
That's something that we would look at. So the best example, if you want to take a look, and I'm happy to share, Wake Forest, recent Parks and Recreation recently did an impact fee study, which is very similar to what we would be doing. And the reason I would point you to that, because it allows you to see, one, what that process is and determining what the cost of recreation and growing recreation is per person within that community. And then it takes a look at how many people are typically within a dwelling, and that's how they develop what that cost is. And so right now, we don't have much to base that on because we don't have the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. So once we get that Parks and Recreation Master Plan, we'll be able to develop that formula to make that decision, is it enough?
Well, I understand that. The thought that comes to mind, though, is that since they have already done it, do we need to reinvent the wheel, or can we use their model?
I think we would be able to, we wouldn't be reinventing the wheel. So what the impact fee study, adding that to the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, it's specific to our projects. So that's why it's going to be, it would need to be included with our master plan process so that we can point back to it.
Yeah, I'm not fighting that. I'm just curious as to, how we can save money if somebody else has done the work.
Yeah, I think it's a wonderful model that we would encourage, our process to look at. And I think it's an important part of the process.
Okay, and I think I understood that the recreational impact fee would be determined as a result of the master plan. You don't have a number in mind.
No, based on our own code, and is that any impact fee that we have has to be directly tied to a project. And we have to have a plan for that project, and we have to be, we have to be able to show that we're ready to move forward. And so I don't have a number in my head because it's going to have to be driven by the master plan.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have any questions?
And how long does a master plan take? You're talking. So,
Good question.
I mean,
Yeah, it varies. So it depends on how quickly we want it to go. It can be done in 6 months, and it can take up to a year.
Sheila, how does the community center plan fit in all this planning? I'm looking at an expansion or something down there because it's not even a full basketball court, is it?
No.
Is it, have y'all looked at that and studied maybe expanding a bigger gym or, it's at a perfect location in my opinion, it's at the community park and it's close enough to downtown where we can use it for sports and entertainment, like with the stage, like Glendale kind of.
Right.
Have you looked at that?
So I think that's something that we would absolutely look at in this master plan process. So I would agree with you that we've kind of outgrown that gym space. Just the program has grown. Our basketball program throughout the winter months has grown, and it's a standing room only. There's not enough seats to accommodate anybody. So we do recognize that there's a need there. It may be an opportunity to utilize some of our school partners on the more short term while we take the time to develop a plan. And I think one of the things that we're going to see through the master plan process is recognizing as our community grows, our footprint's going to grow, and it will help us prioritize kind of where those needs are and looking at our community at large. And so with that said, we think right now that it's in a great place, and it may very well be, but our master plan process could tell us that there's a location on the other side of the town, or maybe there's somewhere else downtown, or maybe they're going to say it would be not cost effective to do the expansion at that facility, that maybe we would be looking somewhere else. So those are things that we could begin to look at through this process, and this process is going to let the community tell us that that gym isn't meeting the need at its capacity, and that we need that's what we're going to be looking for in this process, that the community is going to tell us that that's a priority for us.
Other questions?
It's like the way we're growing, it's, we got to expand somewhere. And by the way, how does Wake County Schools work with you like using the gymnasium, do they charge a?
They
charge
do.
a fee?
And that's something that, we'll continue to look at. I mentioned, we've got longstanding joint use agreements for our parks. There's not been something necessarily joint use in the terms of their indoor facilities. And that as we go through this process, I think that's a great opportunity to look at our needs. And, our school parks need work. There are things and responsibilities that we have in that joint partnership that we're going to have to look at. And so as we continue to have those conversations and, it's a more holistic view that I think going through this process, we'll be able to have a lot of conversations. And it's not necessarily just Wake County Public Schools. East Wake Academy has resources, and they're looking at expanding potentially, when it comes to athletic fields and resources. So there's lots of conversation to be had.
We have in past had relationships and shared stuff with the school facilities. We didn't have anything else. But anyway.
Yeah, our summer camps, when before the community center opened, a lot of our older age groups played at, I believe it was the middle school, if I recall correctly, and we also utilized Zebulon Elementary School for a lot of our summer camps. And so that is a relationship that we've had in the past. I know that we had to rent the facilities from communities and schools, and it was extremely expensive.
Yeah, it was quite expensive. It turned out to be quite expensive. Of course, what we've got now is a whole lot of improvement over what we had, but there is going to be a need for a different facility. Take growing use of that, which back in the old days, trying to get adults involved in recreation was extremely difficult. Now with what we've got now, we've got a whole lot more programs, offering a whole lot more.
Yeah.
And with more people coming in, there's going to be more demand for other programs that it's going to be the responsibility of the recreation department to take care of.
Absolutely. And that's what excites me about the master plan process is there's several different ways you can approach one, but that public input piece and letting the community tell us what they're looking for, what's a priority for them, and what will be unique for us is because we are looking at doubling our population, is that we are going to also take a close look at, what that impact is and what we anticipate those that growing community to look like, and so that we're going to do our best to try and plan for that.
Well, we still may have to use public facilities, school facilities.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Is there any way in your joint use agreement with the school system to get the buildings included in there, even if at a reduced rate? Because I know it is extremely expensive.
Yeah, and I think that that's absolutely something that we can talk with them about, and we're going to have to revisit those contracts. As I mentioned, they need work, and we're going to have to revisit kind of our responsibilities and how we're going to grow and how we're going to move forward, how we're going to meet the needs of our needs, how they're going to meet their needs. And so as we continue those conversations, I think using this process to stand on even more so to really show what our community need is will help facilitate those conversations. And it's not just the opportunity for, just the government, the town of Zebulon to pay for these. And it's not just working with our partners that are also government entities. There's also your public-private partnership opportunities, and having a document like this when your developers come into town and they're wanting to, add certain facilities, that's something that we can look at as, well, our master plan says this is what we need. And, is this something that we can work together on? If they're looking at putting in a splash pad and it's road frontage and it's a little bit separate and apart away from the rest of their development, and they would be comfortable with a public-private partnership. And if, say, that's something that we knew when our master plan, the community wanted was a splash pad. That's an opportunity for the town to work with the developer in a public-private partnership. But it gives us something as a community to stand on and show where that need is.
Good. Anything else? Thank you.
All right, as intro to our next topic, about 4 years ago, we adopted a Greenway bicycle and pedestrian master plan, and that obviously predated our strategic plan. And so our efforts towards that master plan was really geared very heavily to greenways. And this year, as a result of receiving the results from the strategic plan, one of the goals that we put forth in the budget that we were going to present to you is that we were going to focus more on this walkability or connectedness issue, because the community wanted to be connected, but also for recreation, for health purposes as well. And so as with all capital projects, we have different committees, and Sheila is the chair of what we're now calling the Walkability Committee. And this year's focus is we're focused more on sidewalks in the budget that we're going to put before you. And so with that, if I can do it. Recognize Sheila once again. And just so you know, for reference, also on that committee is Michael Clark and Chris Ray.
All right, so we'll get started on our sidewalks presentation. And just to review policies and plans that directly tie to walkability, we have the Comprehensive Master Plan from 2008, in which the goal was to develop and maintain a pedestrian circulation system within town by linking neighborhoods to activity centers, transit stops, schools, parks, and other neighborhoods. We also have the Multimodal Transportation Plan of 2014, where we established the requirement for sidewalks on many Zebulon roadways. We have the Greenway Bicycle and Pedestrian Master Plan that was adopted in 2015, and that was 100% funded by the John Rex Endowment. We also have the Zebulon 2030 Strategic Plan that was adopted in 2018. And I point out that under Small Town Life, we directly discuss increasing the connectedness and walkability in the community. So we're going to give a short review of some walkability projects. It doesn't, it's not a full comprehensive list, but we have had downtown sidewalk improvements in 1998, 2009, and 2018. And these funding opportunities were opportunities that the town leveraged community development block grant funds, which has been very commonplace for the town, is that when we had opportunities to save funds that could be used for expanding sidewalk improvement projects and use them to leverage external funding sources so that we could do larger projects. So we'll talk a little bit more about the community development block grant involvement shortly. We've also had the Zebulon Community Park Walking Trail, which was completed in 2012, and it was 100% financed by the John Rex Endowment through the Healthy Places Active Spaces grant. We also had the Shepherd School Road project with the Highway 64 overpass bridge in 2016. And that was another project with the town and the community development block grant. In additional projects, and just to highlight with, in conjunction with downtown, there's been sidewalk projects on East Barbie Street, on Arundel, West Barbie, and North Wakefield, as well as Gannon, East Horton, and West Vance. There was a half-cent dedication tax for walkability projects identified in 2016. which up to this year was roughly about $40,000. The Greenway Corridor 1 Beaver Dam Creek Trail is the project began in 2017 and it is ongoing. Current funding sources include the town of Zebulon, Wake County Open Source, Parteth, and Campo. And I want to highlight here that our usual funding streams are beginning to change. And a great example of this is our work with the Community Development Block Grant, in that we've been able to leverage funds in past years to complete sidewalk projects. And this has been a great partnership for us. It's allowed us to do some wonderful projects. One that we just completed this past year on south of Rendell Avenue, right at the corridor of downtown. And as the Community Development Block Grant and Wake County officials developed their goals and their plans for 2020 to 2025, they put a heavier emphasis on affordable housing. And the message that we are hearing pretty clearly from staff associated with the Community Development Block Grant is that they are not particularly interested in funding sidewalk projects moving forward. We recognize that that's not going to be a source that we anticipate being able to continue to rely on. So projects that are not directly tied to affordable housing, which is including land purchase, site improvements, infrastructure, and rehab, they're not as interested in those types of, or they're more interested in those types of projects and really not interested in sidewalk. They said that there is potential for sidewalk connections with low-income developments, but it's pretty doubtful, and it's going to be a hard sell for us. And what I think that we'll need to continue to do is watch the Plan Wake process. We got some information about that at our town retreat at Rocky Mount Mills, and it was shared with us in that process that preliminary findings are that walkability is extremely important for the county. And so those are conversations that we need to continue with Wake County and recognize that although Community Development Block Grant's focus is on affordable housing, Plan Wake recognizes that there is a focus on walkability, and how we can work with Wake County and other capacities is something we'll need to continue to look at. So this next slide here just shows the Zebulon Greenway Bicycle and Pedestrian Plan that was adopted. And I wanted to highlight, there's dotted lines kind of in the center city. And this notes existing and potential pedestrian and bike paths. And what is not reflected on this map is this growth that we're experiencing. And we spoke about that earlier this evening with 2,000 approved units to date, doubling our dwelling units if they were all to come in the next 5 to 10 years. So we're going to keep this in mind as we continue to plan as a town for walkability. And next, we're going to talk about our how we prepared for the CIP this year with walkability. So our instructions for the budget process this year were to identify $40,000 projects. So $40,000 is what was allocated specifically for walkability projects. And of that, what could we do with that $40,000 as a project completed? We also were looking at save and spend opportunities where we could leverage funds, as we've done in the past. And this was an opportunity for us to consider the pedestrian plan, It was also an opportunity for us to consider our strategic plan, community development, and recent improvement projects. And that led us to look further at the existing pedestrian plan that we just showed you a few moments ago. And what you see in this next slide, everything that is yellow and red is noted directly from the bicycle and pedestrian improvement plan on the Greenway Master Plan. What's in yellow are existing sidewalks that are on the ground. We are not accounting for any condition, size, if it needs to be repaired or not. It's just, is there sidewalk? What is in red reflects that there is no sidewalk. And by looking at this map, we also, and taking into those considerations of existing projects such as the South Arundel project, our Vibrant Downtown initiatives, we focused on completing missing links on Arundel Avenue. So our next map shows us a total of 8 missing links. And they're both red and blue, and the red lines just reflect larger runs, and the blue lines were smaller projects. And we focused on Gannon Avenue to the Triangle East Shopping Center. And we recognize that there is sidewalk on one side of Arundel Avenue, and on the other side, there are several missing links. Arundel Avenue is a very difficult street to cross for our walkers. And as we grow, that will continue to be a concern. So of these missing links, of those 8, it totals 2,070 linear feet, which is less than a half a mile. The estimated cost to complete is $508,000. They individually range from $35,000 to $86,000. And these are estimates that we worked with Public Works to determine, and we recognize that if you did it all at one time, there may be some economies of scale, but if we were to do them individually, you're looking at about $508,000. And as the economy continues to grow, that price could go up, but at $40,000 a year, that could take us quite some time just to complete that project. So for the 2020 CIP, revenue-wise, we worked with Joe to look at the $40,000 we had originally planned for. There's the anticipated additional $15,000 from growth. But there was also opportunity to leverage some development in lieu fees that totaled $60,000. And so we had a grand total of $115,000 to apply to projects for the upcoming fiscal year. And so we recommend that we complete 3 of the missing links on Arundel Avenue. And we recommend that we complete Gannon Avenue to North Street and complete North Street to Glen Street. And we also would place $6,000 in our reserves funds for Greenway bicycle and pedestrian opportunities. We also recommend that these projects will continue to encourage our community members to walk downtown, and we also recognize that it will create connections to current development and investment on Arundel Avenue and downtown. And second, we would also like to see that we come back together for a fall work session. We recognize that there's a lot of desire to see sidewalk improvements within our community and improve the sidewalk connections, as well as seeing and recognizing our strategic plan and that focus on walkability. And we would like to have a work session with the board to develop a plan for moving forward. So how, knowing some of the challenges before us, we looked at just 8 missing links buildings totaling $500,000 just on Arundel Avenue. And looking at, as we move forward to plan for our community, what is that going to look like? What are our priorities, and how do you want us as a staff to put our focus? Is it creating loops? Is it connecting major thoroughfares? Is it connecting communities to downtown? Is it connecting parks to parks? Kind of having those conversations with you and getting some guidance so that we can also begin to work on how we can maximize funding and revenue opportunities to complete these projects. And I'm happy to answer questions.
Okay. I got them in there somewhere. Does anybody else have anything while I'm trying to find mine?
The cost from North Street to Glen Street, where you connect at the law office. Why is that so much more? I know it's a little larger than what's in front of the Baptist church, but it seems to be so much more.
So in front of the Baptist church, there's no obstructions.
Right.
So you've got just straight paving. There's less to maneuver around. And the next block, that next connector, there's going to be there will be more work to prepare the space for us to provide that sidewalk.
That's good.
Of the half-cent dedicated money, generated 40,000, has that money been spent, or are we holding it?
So it has been saved and leveraged over time, and I believe that this year it's gone towards, and in past years it's gone towards developing the Beaver Dam project.
Developing?
The Beaver Dam Greenway project, so it's been utilized there. And what our recommendation here would be that you can save it, and you get $40,000, and you can save it next year. You have $80,000. So that has happened, and but there are funds that have been spent.
How much have we spent totally on Beaver Dam Greenway? Town money.
Well, we haven't, as far as what we've spent and what we've budgeted are two different things.
Understand.
You'd have to give me a moment. I can't answer off the fly.
I will. I'll ask. I have some other questions while you're looking it up. I know that the funding that we received, we just recently got, I think, 200,000 from Campo on the greenways, but we got considerably less than what we had applied for. Seemed like we asked for 800 or so, and maybe got 80. Is that right?
Oh, so the PARTEV grant is the one that you applied $500,000 for, and we received 90 because we were not originally granted. Right. Campo, I believe, and Chris could provide us more accurate numbers, but I believe it was roughly 800,000 is what we had originally applied for, in that we were not funded, and then they came back and there were rescission funds, and I actually believe is it 1.6, Chris? So Chris was able to secure 1.6 working with Campo and our planning department to go towards the Beaver Dam project.
Yeah, well, I know Don worked on that.
Is that monies excuse me, Chris, is that monies that's already here, or is that monies that they promised us at this point, or redid their budget against?
Great question, Mr. Bungard. We are in the process of waiting on a letter from Campo. We're expecting that letter any day to have a financial agreement or contract, for lack of better words, to come in front of you to present. But Sheila's right. We were successful in getting $1.6 million to fund that project. So we hope to, as early as your July or August, we won't have a July meeting, but early as your August meeting, bring that contract in for you for concurrence and acceptance.
So you're saying the money's there?
Yes, sir. We have got verbal commitments for that. They, Ms. Gretchen Vetter with Campo told us that she is working. We got qualified for CMAQ funds, which is Clean Air Mitigation Funds, and they're doing some due diligent process with them to get those funds removed from existing projects over to us, and we should be getting those any day, or commitment for those any day.
Okay, I don't mean to be technical, but you said they verbally committed, we ain't seen the money in the bank.
We have verbally been committed. We do not have the money in the bank. Campo works on a reimbursement basis. So the money will never kind of be lump sum gave to us and we spend down on it. We would have to spend the dollars and ask for reimbursement.
I understand. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mayor, if you, or in the board for that matter, if you reference page F15, that lists the expenses to date for the Beaver Dam Creek Greenway. And it's a little over $260,000 spent to date.
Okay. And budgeted is what? You know, I'm not trying to make it hard, I'm just.
I know you're
curious
not.
about
I just don't, I don't readily have these figures. I'm sorry.
Currently, sir, those funds have been, that Joe mentioned, have been on design, easement, acquisition and stuff. We currently have approximately $1 million in our capital project fund for greenways.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I understand that CDBG is backing off a sidewalk, but one of the criteria of the North Carolina Housing Finance Agency is proximity to services and goods, and groceries and that sort of thing. Are they ruling out connecting to sidewalks? For example, if you take the one on Pony Road, there's not going to be a sidewalk that those people can walk to the shopping center on, and they're just saying no on that sort of thing?
So Wake County, from my understanding, has the ability, they take what those federal and state priorities are, but they also have the ability to make their own priorities in addition to those that support those priorities. And theirs have been specifically tied to building affordable housing. And so that's where they say, if you push them really hard, that we got where, you know, they would consider a project that directly was tied to, say, Habitat for Humanity or an affordable building development that was identified, and we kept throwing out ones that we knew of, and we continued to get pushed on the affordable housing. Every time we went through that conversation, they steered it back to affordable housing. So I think those are conversations that will have to continue, and that's not that we're just going to take no for an answer off the cuff, but it's something that we'll have to continue to talk about and push on behalf of our community. But I do think that we have to be wise in recognizing that that revenue stream may not be there.
Right, well, where I'm focusing my thoughts is sidewalks connected to affordable housing.
Absolutely.
Specifically, that it wouldn't be in front of my house. for
Right,
example.
right.
But it makes sense to me that if you want affordable housing, in order to get the grants and the tax credits to build affordable housing, they have to qualify, and accessibility is part of that
Yeah.
formula. So it does not make sense for me to just them say blanket, we're not doing sidewalks. It needs to be tied, if it's tied to Shepherd Green or something like that. That's just me, okay? But I guess not a whole lot of common sense up there. The only other thing that I want us just to be aware of
Okay.
is on Gannon Avenue. I had personally, right or wrong, always envisioned that that street would widen out at some point, like we did on the north side. And if we put the sidewalk right up to it, then we're putting it in harm's way if in fact it becomes a 4-lane street all the way in. So it's just something to be aware of within the easements, that we set it back far enough that we don't end up wasting that money and it gets torn up. And I realize it's not going to happen in a year or two, and it may never happen, but as we grow, I tend to think You know, as we're trying to revitalize downtown, that's the main entrance coming off the 4-lane. And there's traffic problems out there right now, so there needs to be something done in the future.
Okay.
I just don't want us to throw the money out there and then tear it up, throw it away.
I understand.
That's all I have.
Mayor, let me just elaborate. If that page F15, I think is going to be very informative for you and the rest of the board. The budget number that Chris referenced, it's important to note that part of that money is coming from 2 grants, one from the Wake County Open Space and one from Part F, and both of those have expiration dates. So I think that's important for the board to be aware of.
F15?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. All right. Okay. Oh, where's the Duke site?
What was that?
That one's new to me. Y'all know where it is?
What is it?
The Duke site?
No,
It's West Barbie Street, sir. As you're right behind Mr. G's, the transformer site there, they look to do some upgrades to that facility in there. And we, through our master planning and through our comprehensive planning, they were required to put sidewalks in. And we felt like that in the long run, those funds could be better spent somewhere else due to the lack of public in the area. So we asked them to do a fee in lieu. And so we collected those funds and are then pledging them toward this year's coming budget.
Oh, it's Duke Energy.
Duke Energy, yes, sir.
I just like, where is that?
Didn't ring a bell, yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
If I'm looking at this right, where you said the Zebulon Baptist Church?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, the next place is, that's Avon sidewalk. Okay, how far is it gonna go?
As far as,
Just to that road.
That's to that,
correct.
Correct.
So it's
Oh,
just
okay.
going to go to North Street.
It's gonna go from north to Glen.
to Glen Street? Oh, okay.
you probably can't go any farther, can you, Sheila?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Probably can't go any farther on Gannon, can you? Because those houses are sitting on the street almost, a lot of them.
So there's, getting to Gannon from Arundel, is that what you're talking about, or going down?
Going up the right-hand side of Arundel. You know, we got one sidewalk, right? You're talking about another one.
The other side?
I'm saying the houses doesn't have any front yards hardly. How you would do sidewalks there?
So some of them, there's some stretches through there that do have sidewalks, some, they do have small yards, and we recognize that. There will be some challenges that we're ready to work around as far as poles and driveways, and that will be able to accommodate that through this project. There's also properties on Arundel Avenue that you'll see are like the Glenn Lewis insurance property. So he's going to be putting in his own sidewalk. And so those are things that, as we work with you to prioritize, those are things that we would look at is where are we likely to see private development on its own, and maybe what are things that we could do to help support that, knowing that they're going to do that. But and going back to where we connected that private investment on Arundel Avenue, in addition to the investment in our downtown, and how we can continue that connection to the communities that are in those neighborhoods. And I think that's what I've heard a lot of talk about, the different roads within town and in these neighborhoods that we see people walking and they need sidewalk, and they're out walking their dogs, and they're having to walk in people's grass, or they're having to stop for traffic. And those are things that we want to work with you on, to have those conversations to figure out where these priorities are.
I'm not against sidewalks, but it's interesting that some of the places that you have sidewalks, people still walk in the street.
Yep.
And that's true around my neighborhood where there are some sidewalks up on Church Street. But, and I don't care. I mean, it's fine. When I walk, which is not real frequent, but I do the same thing. You know, it's just the way it is. I don't know if sidewalks are going to push them off the street or not in the developed subdivisions. It might.
Yeah.
Well, I do know one thing that, there are streets in town that are being walked really heavily that are not sidewalks. And, if, you'll see people walking their dogs, they're just walking at night, and people don't know which side of the road to walk on to start with. And, somebody's gonna get hurt extremely bad because we don't have the sidewalks for people to walk on. And, like I said, there is a lot of people walking, I know in our community, and it's,
Yeah, the street you're talking about is Stratford Drive,
yeah.
right next to
Yeah, it's-
Well, they do the same thing in my neighborhood in the
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, Wakefield Street's a good example.
Yeah.
We get a lot of walkers and
Yeah.
doggone, they go out there in black clothes at night.
Yeah.
But,
But anyway, we can't resolve that issue here.
it's something, in my opinion, that it's gonna take a while to do it, but it needs to be done because it's an extremely dangerous situation.
Yeah, the only saving grace on that street is the fact that it's well lit.
Which street? Our street? Yeah, we got a new light pole today, too.
Yeah, we got a new light bulb.
Yeah.
Anything else for Sheila?
No, I think we're going in the right direction with our focus on walkability, especially knowing that through Wake County's plan weight process that they're getting the same feedback, and that I think as we continue to move forward, that we recognize that it's going to cost a lot of money to complete these projects.
Yeah, the new subdivisions, we're making them get sidewalks. In the past, we hadn't done it because I don't guess it was something we didn't think about or whatever, but, in the existing old town here, there are plenty of needs for sidewalks.
Absolutely.
Anything else?
That's it.
Thank you, Sheila.
Okay, our next presentation focuses on street paving, which is going to be an update of the program that we've had for a few years. And then we're going to transition into transportation improvements, most specifically intersection improvements that we put in your budget for consideration. And with that, I'll recognize Chris Ray.
Thank you, Joe. Good evening, Mayor, members of the board. I think first, no times I put a cover page in, it's just kind of a holding place. But I think this one really hits home about some of the things and the challenges we got coming in the head, years ahead. And one thing to always remember about transportation projects, they take many, many years to develop and come about. The top left-hand corner is part of a traffic signal improvement that we're asking for this year, but that's part of the North Arundel Avenue project that was designed in 2009. So that one's been on the books for a while. You look at the paving management piece, that's something we started in 2016 and are ongoing. The corridor improvement pieces, we have been doing spot improvements for corridor improvements for our transportation plan, and this year we'll be doing a major initiative in regards to that. So that process takes a while. Then you're seeing intersection improvements in the bottom left. That is a part of a conceptual study we've started for Shepherd School Road and Old Bun and Proctor, where we're getting ready to see significant amount of growth. Clearly, those investments in transportation improvements are going to require engineering inspection. And they're also going to take a tremendous amount of community engagement. Our community is going to change, and the biggest demand, in my opinion, we're going to have the next 10 years is transportation improvements. So with that said, we'll kind of jump into, there it goes. Kind of give you an update of what's going on, what you're going to see in the starting June 3rd, next week. Our 2019 paving improvements program included some milling and resurface, which are the traditional process compared to what we've done 2 years ago with some slurry seals and stuff. So this year we'll be starting with Poplar Street, North Gill Street, Whitley Street, and North Pitt. Barn Hill Construction will be on site June 3rd with the millers. Hopefully the milling will start around 8 a.m. At the same time, we'll have their subcontractor in some neighborhoods doing some crack sealing, like looking at preservation techniques, trying to preserve those roads, prevent the water getting in them. We're going to put down about 6,200 pounds of crack seal to try to prevent that water and freeze thaw there. So this year's budget, which is a combination of over 2 years, is $290,000. And like I said, that'll be starting June 3rd. The next piece is kind of a little reminder of where we've been and where we're going. If you may recall, in 2016, we made multiple presentations at council retreat, staff, I think it was a budget work session, and also one of your regular meetings. And from that, the pavement management plan and study that Volkert Engineering helped us with, we came up with this table about how to address streets and stuff. So it's more here as a reminder, but the biggest takeaway from that is that if we wanted moderate streets, we needed to invest $151,000 a year. If we wanted good streets, we needed to invest about $228,000 a year. So the takeaway from that is we are investing approximately $160,000 annually. So that puts us about $70,000 short. And these dollars here we're talking about are construction values, not necessarily design and engineering inspection. So even though our ratings are still fairly good for streets, and we'll talk about that, we are not meeting some of the goals that we laid forward with that plan. All right, to kind of give you after the paving in the next 2 weeks, this is where we'll be standing. We'll have 40, excellent streets will be 40%, good streets around 12, down to 4% for poor streets. The poor streets, if you're looking for where they might be, if you want to ride them, are Cedar Drive, Cedar Court, and Wellington. And we have about 10 streets that are in the modern phase and stuff that are starting to need some attention. Our overall condition score at the end of this year, we're projecting to be 89.7. You know, the one right now, our average is staying up because we're adding new streets fairly quickly. This year, we're going to probably add over 7 miles of street to our pile bill. So that's one way it's reflecting on our averages, kind of supporting our average a little bit. The second chart here is just another way to look at it, how the breakdowns come compared to the pie chart. So again, right now, our overall average, we're doing pretty good. We're, you know, right at fair. We're almost in good, but our streets on average, our overall average, weighted average is fair. One of the things that you saw basically in that presentation several years ago is we tried to tie the car to the street condition. We were basically scoring that 89.7. That shows that's what a fair condition for this, I think it's a 55 or 57 Chevy and all. And you can see we spent a lot of time during that time talking about the curve and all. And as the street goes out over time, this thing drops off significantly quicker. At first several years, it stays fairly flat. But after we get to a point about fair, and if you're not making investments in your street, that curve drops off substantially or they have to be reinvested. And so I guess it's just a refresher from several years ago. To kind of give you an idea of what a fair street looks like and one in good condition, the one on the left is, I think, West Franklin before we slurried it this past year, where we were taking that fair condition and elevating it. And I think that this is a picture from several years ago. I think this is Sexton Avenue, but at the time in 2016, these were the condition ratings of those streets, just to give you a feel from a numerical value to actual site conditions of the road. The big piece we wanted to talk to you tonight about and looking ahead is what we have and then plan for in the upcoming budget. The number one question I get asked when I go speak to the Lions Club or I get stopped on the street is, when are you going to do something about Green Pace and Arundel, Chris? We're seeing extensive aggressive behavior up there, backlogs up there. When are you going to do something about it? Well, the NCDOT, every time we saw them, we shared that same message with them. They actually generated a warrant analysis for these improvements to see if they warranted for a signal. According to the NCDOT, they did meet the warrant analysis, so that it has met the criteria for a signal. So as part of that, and we recognize the same thing, we have put forth in the budget a project to install traffic signal at Green Pace and Arundel. It does include turn lanes on North Arundel Avenue. We got a projected budget of approximately $200,000. So we feel like that is the number one area and one of the biggest places we're seeing hazards in town, and we feel like that we need to look to address that. We have reached out to NCDOT for possible joint funding. possible ways to jointly work together, but have not got any feedback from them and no commitment at this time to that. Basically, when I spoke to John Sandor, they said they have no funding budgeted for this. So we feel like it's an important project, and we're asking to move forward with it. All right.
Let's
Yes, sir.
talk about that for a minute. I don't disagree.
Yes, sir.
That the intersection needs something. When when you and I spoke, the idea was we would pay for it and then at some point get reimbursed by the state. Is that out the window?
No, it's not out. We'll still continue having those discussions, but we're just trying to get funds budgeted so we can be ready to go.
My concern is that this project's gonna turn out to be a lot more expensive because DOT is gonna come in and start putting demands on us as we do something in that
Start the
intersection.
design process.
They're not just gonna let us drop a traffic signal in there. And, so I really do have some concerns that before we do anything, we need to run our plans by them and be sure that, you know, that they're gonna not come back.
Absolutely. I mean, clearly this is a NCDOT roadway. Anything we do out there, we got to get their blessing on. One of the earliest things we always do with a project like that is go have a sit-down meeting with the NCDOT to understand, just like you say, we don't get any surprises. We thought we were going to do this, and all of a sudden we get whammied over the head, and we've already made investments into design drawings or something, and now we got to change them. And of course, that takes time and money, and we don't want to do that. So one of the things is to have a early kickoff meeting with NCDOT in regards to that.
We were finally able to get some funding or get that traffic signal at the entrance to Industrial Park through political efforts. And I don't know that we've been asked to do any political efforts. Don with Campo, me with contacts I have, perhaps some others. Seems to me we should try that.
We had a lot of, well, you want to call it inside tracker if you want to, but your division chief, Joey Hopkins, had a lot to do with that stoplight down there on Industrial Drive.
Right.
I've not heard him say anything about Green Pace Road. Without him on our side, you ain't gonna get there.
Yeah. Clearly, we think a public partnership with NCDOT is ideal. We would really prefer to do that, whether, like you say, we invest it and get reimbursed, or we go 50-50 or 75-25. We're going to fully explore the alternatives with NCDOT about possibly coming up with funding. I think by putting this money in the budget, it shows that it is a priority. We see it as an issue, and then I think we can then go ask them for assistance and help. But it shows our commitment that this is a real issue. And I think that's also supported by them doing a warrant analysis. So we see it as a local condition. We're hearing about it. They've got a scientific report through a warrant analysis that says it's needed. Now we just need to work out funding. And I think that's where we want to head with this project.
Well, I think we need to proceed with caution.
Absolutely.
I really, really do, because first of all, I get really ill because I don't think the state's living up to their obligations. And when they can't do it, they dump it on municipal government. And don't get me started.
We've had that conversation, sir, over the years. And you're right. It's coming more and more common that municipalities are having to make these investments, unfortunately.
But I'm assuming that traffic is coming from the new subdivisions on down the road there, and if that's the case, which I'm sure it is, man, it's going to get a lot worse at Old Bun, Proctor, and
Yes, sir.
I mean, it's going to be tenfold what that problem is.
Yeah.
And it's going to do it in a hurry.
Yes.
Well, we've got those two subdivisions that, and there's a lot of traffic, people coming down 96, getting on 64 too. So it's not only coming from the new stuff there, but it's coming here. I really think we need to move forward with this thing so that, and make sure that, you know, we can get the funding or try to get some funding from it. But we need to move forward on these intersections, because to me, the intersection here and the intersection out at Shepherd School and Old Bun is going to be extremely critical. And I think one of the biggest problems we got in town right now is moving traffic.
Yeah, well, I'm not advocating not to move forward, so don't misinterpret that. You know, what I'm saying is that we have not tried politically to get it, and that's the way we got the one at Industrial, and I think we need to give it a shot. And, you know, before we run out there, do something, because it's gonna take time to get approvals anyway.
Yes, sir. That's goes back to my earlier comment, that transportation projects take time. This is gonna take time to design, get approvals. DOT's looking at as much as 2 months for turnaround approvals on stuff. So this is something, we gotta start moving on. It is an issue now, and we need to be moving in that direction, because you're right, it does take time to accomplish these goals.
All right.
All right. Thank you, sir. Good question. Next intersection, and Mr. Beck kind of, I guess, was looking ahead at my presentation a little bit and saw that clearly we agree with Mr. Beck that the intersection of Shepherd School Road and Old Bund is going to be an issue. What you see here in this rendering is a piece of a conceptual study that staff worked with this year with WSP to help develop some long-range estimates and stuff. And so we see this as a future project that is building, and we've asked in this budget to start the design process, not construction, but design only. It kind of goes back to the mayor's comment. These things take time. We want to start chipping away at some of these projects to start making some headway, because they do take time. So for all the reasons we discussed, I believe this is something that's important and needs to move forward in the coming year. The third piece in the budget that we have this year for a transportation standpoint is, everybody's mentioned it here around the table tonight, is the roadway system is going to change. We are growing, like Sheila said. We need to reach out to our communities and talk about what impacts they're seeing, what growth things they feel like is needed. We hear the second piece I hear the most about is Pierce's and Proctor, right behind Greene Pace. What are we going to do there, Chris? It's unsafe. This, we constantly have accidents there. What can we do to make that a better intersection? So one of the things clearly that can come in about is a traffic signal. Or is it an opportunity to put a roundabout in and create a feature in a community? Maybe it don't have to be quite as elaborate as the one I picked up off the internet, but it's an opportunity there to create a feature, but also do a traffic calming device. But our main goal here, whatever turns out with Pierce's and Proctor and Long Pierce's and Jones and all, is we want to get the community engaged and see what their concerns are and talk to them. So we want to have some meetings and do some surveys and, give you an opportunity to hear and feedback from our community what they think is important. Is that intersection important? Because I'm hearing it, that we shouldn't be making recommendations only on what Chris hears. We need to hear what the whole community is hearing. And so this is just an opportunity for us to engage our citizens and get feedback from what they want to do, because it's really going to lead into these next slides that we pick up and what's coming in the next 5 to 10 years. We need this input from them. So as part of this budget, we're reaching out to asking you to provide fundings to help us reach out and collect that data. I know. So, and then the last one is kind of some of the things that we're seeing on the horizon. Transportation is extremely expensive. There's projects out there we've all talked about, and I don't want to read this list to you, but there's pieces there from North Arundel Avenue to Shepherd School Road to Proctor Street Corridor, to Old Bund widening. All these projects have significant cost tags to them. To widen Proctor in this diagram we got here to 3 lanes is going to be expensive. Old Bund Road to go to 4 lanes with a center median is going to be, extremely expensive. So we need to make sure we get the public's comment, and we need to make sure we're planning in the future to meet the growing demands. And these are just some of the projects in that corridor, in that area that we are starting to see, whether Old Bund Road, Barrington, and Shepherd's Park, development, Shepherd's Point, that's putting tremendous demand on this infrastructure here. And I think you'll start seeing more and more issues as we go down the road. So it's important to recognize that we got a lot of heavy lifting to do in the future in regards to transportation, and some of them are going to be expensive. And so with that being said, I'll be glad to answer any questions you have. And of course, our goal tonight is not to get to this situation.
I think something else is that, I didn't realize that, and I get my streets messed up, so make sure I'm on the right street, Judge Street out here. connection between Arundel and Shepherd School Road is a DOT road.
It is DOT road. I promise you, every time I sit down with NCDOT, I ask them about what they're gonna do about that road. We've even, throw around the options that if they would pave it, we'd maybe consider, taking it into our paving system. And Mr. Wheeler, several times, he said, I'll look into it and get back to you, but unfortunately, we haven't. It's one of those issues we're gonna keep raising every time we see, NCDOT and meet with them regarding TIAs or other developments. Hey, what can we do here? What can we accomplish? Is there something, a partnership that we can come with where we can get these roads improved?
Well, I see it as a connection from people coming from Old Bun Road trying to get on 64 to 64.
Yes, sir. I think as we continue to grow, that is definitely one street that's gonna see additional stress, and it is clearly, in poor condition. I feel comfortable saying that.
It's actually, in my opinion, the worst street in town.
Amen.
I mean, it's terrible. And I think I've made the statement before, as Dale just pointed out, it's a cross connection, and that road may, in fact, need to be widened at some point in time.
Yes, sir.
As all that development goes on out that way.
I think that's definitely clearly a street we need to, when we do our transportation plan update, to look closely at, because I think your intuition is correct. It's going to see a lot of additional demand from that growth in that quarter.
Without new intersections to 264 and 64, both sides of town, then
It has nowhere else to go.
It's gonna be a friendly, complicated system to it.
Absolutely, sir.
Other questions?
Chris,
Yes,
Chris,
sir.
how much do the developers throw into, road widening and all that? How much?
Currently,
Is there an impact fee for
yeah,
them?
they pay a transportation impact fee. That is a funding source that we can use. It's paid per house, each house that comes on board. We,
How much is it per house? And,
I'm
you
like,
know,
well,
I saw you had like 2 million in something to do something, I just,
yeah, our current transportation fee is $885 per single-family home. And also, every time a house that is closed is no, we are collecting $885. Now, we've also worked with the developers of Barrington and Autumn Lakes in our special use agreements or development agreements we're calling. They are contributing funds that will help go to make some of these improvements. Unfortunately, they're not enough to make some of these large investments. You know, you see Old Bun there, for example, phase 1, from basically Hyde's Car through that intersection all the way to Canal Court. It's estimated at $2.8 million. We're not gonna get that kind of money from Autumn Lakes or Barrington to make those improvements.
well, maybe we should, bump up that, impact fee because, they're the ones making the money,
Yes, sir.
you know, and
It is imposed in our fee schedule this year, and I don't remember what it is off the top of my head, but I see Joe looking at it now. We are recommending it to be increased. Joe, can you tell him how much it is?
Yeah, if you look at page D3, we've proposed bumping it up to a little over, close to $1,200.
So about a 50% increase.
If you figure 2,000 houses is 1.6 million on that at 800, so nothing particularly to sneeze at, but 1,200 would jump it up by half again, pretty much. Another 800,000.
so how's the impact fee spent? Is it spent on sidewalks or just road improvement?
Typically, to date, we have spent it on roadway improvements. We've used the impact fee, for example, from We Respond to help fund our portion of North Arundel Avenue Access and Operational Plan. Our 20% match to the grant has went to that. So right now, that's typically where it's going. We've also done some of our street paving projects over the past years that have got some funding from that. So we had the opportunity to put it in multiple places where you deem is most appropriate.
Let me elaborate on that. So the strategy is the transportation impact fees will go towards signal improvements, because when developments come in, they have impacts away from the frontage of their development. They produce traffic that goes down to an intersection. So we're looking at using those transportation impact fees to fund the signal improvements. The one area where we're really getting hurt on is if you look at this Old Bun widening, this cost, this 2.8, we missed some considerable opportunities by not having an updated transportation plan when Shepherd Park came in,
Right.
when Barrington came in, when Autumn Lakes came in, that they were not required to widen their road frontage. So that's the other part of the strategy, is to get an updated transportation plan so that when these developments come in, they not only pay the transportation impact fee to fund the signals,
This is what you got to do.
but they will have to widen the street in front of their development as well.
Those are state roads as well, though, right?
Yes, sir.
Yep.
Old Bun is a state road. Anything else,
Yeah.
guys?
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
All right, I'm going to keep this screen up as a segue. Similar to the nonprofit policy, we think that your current fund balance policy is costing you some opportunities. I thought for sure when we started this budget, creating this budget in November, that we were going to have to ask you to revise your fund balance policy in advance of adopting the budget. I don't think, well, I know that you don't need to do that before the budget, but I feel confident you're going to have to do that before the next budget. You can see some of the particular costs that are in front of here. And I think there is some margin within your fund balance that can be utilized. But before you decide what, if any, you want to change on that, I thought it would be important to talk about what the rationale is that goes into your fund balance in general, but the fund balance policy specifically. You got it?
All right, thank you, Joe. As Joe mentioned, we'll just kind of review what our current policy is, and I'll give you some kind of metrics as to what goes into it a little bit. I won't bore you with too many of the details of it, because it's very kind of convoluted, how the bond rating agencies rate you. These are, we'll first take a look at last year, kind of a recap of last year. These are June 30, 2018 numbers. You'll see the total fund balance there. This is all components of fund balance, almost 9.4 million. In our policy, we use the unrestricted fund balance. That at June 30, 2018 was just shy of 8 million. That's made up of committed, assigned, and unassigned. And then if you look at what was our fund balance percentage at June 30, 2018, which looks at our unrestricted fund balance as a percentage of our projected expenditures. With our 50%, that's our budget at June 30 was 14.1 million roughly. So that half of that is about 7 million. So there was excess of about 925,000 over what was budgeted. Some of that being assigned, about 1.5 million in assigned. That's the little light green right here. This is the Moody's factors that they use in rating municipalities and local governments. They look at these 4 different categories, and the breakdown is as follows here. You got 30% goes towards comes from your finances, and there's 4 categories in that they look at and score. 30% comes from your economy and your tax base. How big are you? What's your total assessed value? And some socioeconomic factors also go in that. And then 20% toward management, and the other 20 is for your debt and pension measurements. In that finances, that 30%, they look at the fund balance as a percentage of your revenues. That's 10%. Anything over 30% is kind of AAA worthy, which I'll kind of show you their scale here in a second.
Can we stop 1 second there? Because that revenue's at 10%, I had understood that they looked at your payments. They frowned on it if your payments exceeded 10% of your budget, your payments.
You mean like debt service?
Right.
Well, no, this is 10% of that 30%, like a third of that 30 is based on what your fund balance is as a percentage of revenues. It's not, the metric itself is not 10%. So that's something totally different from what you're asking. You'll see here in a second a little more what I mean.
Okay.
So you'll see here, these are the main categories of the scores. AAA, AA, A, BAA, and BA. And then they look at she was able to talk with a lady at Moody's. She was able to share this scale. She wasn't able to share the detail of like what ranges, okay, your fund balance percentage is 40%. That would probably put you in maybe like A or AA. She couldn't give me all the details, but I have our scorecard and how they score us in each category. But what you want to do is have a low total raw score based on all these categories. So if you get 0.5, that's as good as you can do. Let's say you have a total of 1.5 for your total raw score. That's about as good as you can get. But this is
we an A right now?
AA.
We are AA.
AA3. So that 10% percentage of fund balance as a percentage of operating revenues, you'll see here like I said, 30% or better is AAA worthy. So that's this kind of orangish, brownish line. The U.S. median is 33.9%. That's the dotted white line here. And these are our last 6 years where we scored on this metric. So about as good, we get a 0.5 on this category, which is as good as you can get. Oops. Excuse me, last 7 years. This is 2018. This is a projection of what our fund balance and our percentages will be at June 30, 2019. Total fund balance is about almost 9.6 million. And unrestricted of about 8.3 million. With our projected proposed budget of about a little over 12 million, that 50% would put us at about 6 million. So even with that, we have about 2.3 million in excess over the 50% policy. All right, this is looking still at 2019 projections with the unrestricted fund balance of 9.5. Let's say if there's a concern about can we meet our cash flow needs, let's say if we have another recession. This Great Recession number, that's some sales tax loss and some investment in personal property, reinvestment in personal property loss. The regionalization, let's say this example is for, let's say U.S. Foods was to pack up and leave town. This is their personal property value to $685,000. And then the globalization example, that's GSK. That's their personal property tax revenue right here. And then here again is our with our 50% policy, that's the 6 million. So go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm glad to see those figures because it always concerned me, but what I think they don't include is the impact of the loss of the jobs and the money that the people spend in the community. So that just needs to be kept in your mind because it's going to affect other businesses and other revenues
All right.
by losing that employment.
All right, so in thought of maybe changing the policy in the future, what I did was kind of surveyed some comparable towns and some local towns. We're fairly unique, as many of you know, in a lot of ways. But what we see here is a handful of towns locally. I tried to find some in our population range and some in our budget size range. That was kind of hard to do to get a nice perfect match. But you'll see a handful here of some local ones, population, their budget, and then their fund balance percentage that they use in their policy and the type that they use in their policy on this far right column here. You'll see here the majority of them, 7 of those use unassigned, 2 use unrestricted, and Carrie uses accessible. That's what they use, which is assigned and unassigned.
Well, let me comment. That's interesting too, but I have always been at least of the opinion that the smaller you are, the higher fund balance you need. Because if you buy a fire truck, for example, it costs us the same as it does carry. Mm-hmm. And 25% of 175 million is a lot of money. Yeah. So, I'm not speaking against this. I'm just saying these are some things to think about because, again, our expenses are the same as Raleigh's, for example. Mm-hmm. And their fund balance, they can afford to be a little lower, I believe. Right. But I think the state only requires, 8%?
Right.
So the lowest I have seen is 15. Mm-hmm. So anyway,
yeah, you'll see here the lowest one is 20 right there.
Yeah.
So of those 7 unassigned, the median number is 25, average 28. Among those 7, and then the 2 that use unrestricted is 29. The median 29 and the average 29. That's Roseville here at 33 and Apex at 25. So just for some comparison purposes when it comes time to maybe redo our policy, just something to keep in mind. Just as a quick reminder, you're all should be aware of this. Our policy here is currently, this was adopted in 2011, that we are to maintain an unrestricted fund balance in the general fund of no less than 50%. Just to remind you, unrestricted is a total of committed, assigned, and unassigned. So that basically excludes the restricted portion, such as Powell bill. There's a portion that's restricted by state statute, and like the developer reimbursements is another example of. It's just stuff that we can't spend on anything. And anything in excess of 50% is available for general appropriation in the budget. So I guess we can, if we want to open it for any comment or discussion at this point about if you have any ideas yet, do you want to change the portion that we use, and any thoughts on changing the amount that we use?
Well, I'd understood from Joe's opening remarks that we were going to talk about it at a future work session.
But we'll have a future work session, but Bobby's getting to the point. If you've got anything that can help us formulate a draft policy for your consideration.
I sort of made my comments on that. Y'all may recall, we really wrestled with 50 and 45% when we set this policy. And the idea was never to let it go over 70%, which it hasn't, that I'm aware of. But I don't have a number in mind, so I'm not trying to put that forward. I'm just trying to refresh how we got here. But, you know, and I know back when we tried to get financing for the stadium and we could not, and we went to New York and met with these rating companies at that time, and apparently their policies have changed, so I'm not preaching that, but at that time they were extremely interested in what our fund balance was, because they were afraid that if we lost one of the major industries, if we would be in a bad way, excuse me, if we did not have adequate fund balance. So that's 20 years or more ago.
Yeah.
So,
At that time, we were more dependent, but we're moving to a point now where we're not as dependent on the major industries as we were.
I fully agree, and I have all along. In fact, I've told Joe this in conversations. You see that balance shift as we bring on a balance of residential, which we didn't have at that
That's
time.
right. We're getting more at that point now than we have been.
So it changes the dynamics of the whole thing. I fully agree with that. I'm just sharing history, I guess.
Yeah. Well, back then,
But you remember, we could not get the money to build the stadium. They wouldn't float it, and finally, we got some private people to come on board and back us up, and we were able to get it done. So, anyway. That's,
And I'll share another little detail. Our scorecard, like, okay, the categories like AA1, AA2, AA3, we're AA3. To your point a little bit, our raw score was AA1. And then the way it was explained to me, once they take a raw score, they have a committee of anywhere from 3 or more people. And there are other factors that they might discuss to adjust that raw score to their final score. And things like you mentioned, like one large taxpayer, or that type thing, might factor into adjusting that score some.
the Standard & Poor's use the same methodology?
I'm not sure. I think it's similar, but I don't have all the details on it.
Actually met with both of them when we went up there. One was friendly and warm, and the other one was cold as ice. Just, not that makes any difference, but it left an impression on me.
Bobby, could you just give me some pros and cons on maybe dropping it to 40? Would that would mean we could use it if we needed it? Is that right? If we dropped it down?
Right. Yeah, that allows.
Like new fire station, we could pull some of that money out, or
Right. Yeah, you could. That allows for some leeway in some budgeting, and like I said, like Joe's mentioned, there's coming a time here soon where there's going to be some large transportation projects or a fire station example where you're either going to have to borrow or dip into fund balance. So if you dip into fund balance, you will need a policy to allow for that. And yeah, like I said, the fire station, those are big price tags on those few things coming up. So like I said, and we're in good shape. Our debt is really low. But yeah, like I said, the fund balance, all the metrics for fund balance right now, we're scoring as far as bond ratings, we're scoring as high as we can get. There are some metrics they use, like the economy, is kind of where we're getting dinged on right now the most as far as our score goes. And those are sort of out of our control. Those are things like, we're getting better, like we're somewhat weak on we're still relatively small compared to, everywhere else in the country. But some socioeconomic metric they use, we're pretty, I think we're we're in the weak category in that. We're BAA, we score on that. But that's just 10% of the score. So it doesn't drag us down too bad. That answer your question?
Other questions? Thank you, Bob. Appreciate it. All right. Joe, is that all you had? I'm gonna call for
yeah.
public input.
And then after public input, I just had some closing slides, but yes, we're on public input right now.
Okay. I don't know if we're gonna have any, but if there's any public input, anyone here? Thank you.
All right, so moving forward, you've now knocked out 3 work sessions. Your next time to meet is going to be the public hearing. And then as far as adopting the budget, you can adopt it June 3rd after the public hearing. You can utilize your work session on the 12th, as long as it's not later than July 1st. I'm going to use as example, there was a lot of discussion about police parking. And so I'll use that as an example about how there's a couple of ways to approach the budget ordinance adoption. If you are just fundamentally opposed to the whole idea of police parking when it comes to the budget ordinance adoption, you would just say, I adopt the budget with the exception of funding for police parking. That's if you have a fundamental problem with police parking. If, however, you're not fundamentally opposed to police parking, but you want some alternatives studied, then you can still adopt the budget that we presented to you, and just understand that we'll circle back to you and we'll present you with some alternatives. We just didn't have time between the last time you brought it up and now to come back to you with some alternatives. So I wanted you to be aware of that. I thought it was a good illustrative example of how to possibly approach the budget ordinance adoption. And also, I think for the Monday night's meeting, we've got the agenda packets. They're already out? Okay. And that's all I have.
Okay, thank you, folks. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Same move.
Second. We're adjourned. Thank you.